at all to add to it. So let's see how it goes. Anybody seen this recently, this hashtag #MeToo? Okay, thank you. You shook your head. No one in the first group even shook their head. So already A for participation in this group. Thank you. You know, sort of in the last month, sexual harassment has been on the news every time you turn on the news, because it seems that some very big power players, especially in Hollywood, have certainly been accused of pretty gross sexual misconduct over years and years now. And so this was the social media hashtag where they were encouraging people, if they ever felt like they had been harassed, to tell their story. And it was interesting because I watched it, and the first day there were a lot of women that put this on. And then as you kept watching it, it was lots of women and men that were using this hashtag and telling their stories. So it's been sort of interesting from someone who does this for a living, and I don't think it being all that prevalent, to see how many people, and especially just watching my own friends on social media, that told stories of times when they felt like they were harassed, made to be uncomfortable, touched inappropriately. And so often it would seem to be like when they were in their 20s and maybe didn't feel like they were strong enough to stand up to somebody. So kind of pay attention to it and just watch kind of as the movement keeps going to see what, if anything, else develops from it. So I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios and get you to answer, not individually. I won't call on you individually, but just kind of as a group. We'll see if you actually can speak back. The first one we have, Elise is an administrative assistant. She is attractive and young. Every time Fred comes into her office, she tells him how cute he looks in his uniform. One day she invites him to dinner. He refuses. He says he doesn't think it's a good idea for coworkers to date, and he tells her she's making him uncomfortable. The next day she asks him out again. She tells him, if you go out with me, I'll make sure you get the best equipment assigned to you, and I'll make sure you get your choice of shifts. But if you don't, I'll make sure you work every holiday. He agrees to go out with her. Has Elise sexually harassed Fred? Yes. Okay. So we get that even cute young women can sexually harass people. Just because you're female and cute doesn't mean you can say whatever you want to. Start from here. When Fred comes into the office and she tells him how cute he looks in his uniform, has she sexually harassed him there? You probably can get away with that once. You look really cute in your uniform today. If you keep saying it over and over, you're probably sexually harassing. But the next day she invites him to go to dinner. Is that sexually harassing Fred? No, they're just coworkers. You can ask your coworker out on a date. I would highly recommend you do this on your own time and not at work. But technically that's not sexual harassment. He says, no, you're making me uncomfortable, and she does it again. That's clearly where she's crossed the line. The minute you've been told, I'm uncomfortable by what you're doing, that means you can't do that again. You've been told, so you have to stop. That's sexual harassment. Here we have not just sexual harassment, but other harassment discrimination. Trevor is a supervisor in the jail. Lynn is one of his employees. He's often late to work. After several warnings, Trevor writes up Lynn, gives her a one-day suspension. Lynn's coworker, Sean, hears about it, and he tells Samantha, who's another coworker, he isn't surprised. He went to high school with Lynn, and she's always late for everything. He makes a joke how she's probably going to be late for her own funeral. Lynn comes back to work after her one-day suspension. Samantha tells Lynn about the joke Sean said. She gets upset about it. She goes to Trevor, the boss, about the joke. He refuses to hear her complaint, tells her to go back to work. Has she been harassed or discriminated against? No. She's just been told you're late. And you're always late. You're probably going to be late for your own funeral. Well, that's okay. Was Trevor, the boss's reaction, correct? Because she's not been harassed. Was that the correct way to handle it? No. If you're a supervisor, it'd be really nice to say, I don't care, go back to work. But that's clearly not the way to handle it, and clearly not the way your supervisors here are going to handle it if you have a complaint you need to make. But let's go back. Instead of saying, I've known her forever, she's always late, what if Sean says, I'm not surprised, Lynn's late because she's a woman. Everybody knows that women can't be on time for anything. She's been harassed or discriminated against at that point? Yes. You can't say women are always late. You can't say men never remember anything. No matter how true you think it is, we don't get to lump people into these generic classes based on their likeness. You can't say all women do this, all men do this, white people do this, black people do this, Asians do this, Muslims do this, Christians do this. You don't get to lump people in together. Everybody has their own traits, and lumping them in would be a form of harassment or discrimination. Last one. Steve Yawn is a manager who's conducting interviews for a food services worker position. He interviews Will, a candidate who is qualified. Steve notices Will has a slight accent, and he asks him where he's originally from. Will says his family moved to America from Saudi Arabia when he was 8, and that Will is a shortened, Americanized version of his name. When he learns this, Steve asks Will if he's a terrorist, how he plans to get any work done if he always has to stop and pray to Muhammad. Will is not hired. Has he been discriminated against? Yes, clearly. That one's pretty simple. Yeah. We don't get to ask people just because they're of Middle Eastern descent if they're terrorists. We also don't get to assume that just because your family came from Saudi Arabia that you stop and pray to Muhammad every hour. Those kind of generalizations is what you can't do. So, from a general personnel perspective and policy, you're here today. I don't know that y'all have ever had any kind of sexual harassment training before. If you have, great. Well, a refresher never hurts anybody. If you haven't, even better, we'll learn a few new things hopefully today. But you need to know that your employers, whether you're working for the city or the Board of Education or one of the authorities here, that they are committed to creating a workplace free from unlawful harassment of employees by other employees and officials, or the unlawful harassment of the officials and the employees by visitors and vendors. Your employers will not accept the unlawful harassment of a vendor or a visitor by any employee. You can't harass or discriminate against people because of their race, their sex, their religious creed, their color, their national origin, their ancestry, their disability, any medical condition, their age, or any other basis that's protected under federal law. There's a whole lot of reasons you don't get to harass or discriminate people, all of those groups of people. Now, there are other things, you can pick on your coworker because your coworker has a funny, quirky habit. I'm not asking you to come to work and just be robots at work. We live here in Alabama where Auburn and Alabama fans like to pick at each other in nice ways sometimes, not so nice ways other times. Auburn fans are not a protected class. You can pick on them all you want to. Alabama fans, there's not a lot to pick on us about right now, so probably not much to say, but you can. I like your hat, sir. But you can pick on, we're not asking, like I said, we're not asking you to come to work, not be friends with your coworkers, not be comrades, not try to make it an enjoyable time getting your work done. But make sure you understand that these protected classes, those are really topics that you just need to steer clear of and not make assumptions about people. Your employers encourage you to address harassment directly when it occurs. Any incident of harassment shall be reported immediately to your supervisor or the Human Resources Director. If someone does or says something to you that makes you uncomfortable, tell them right then. Don't talk to me like that. Don't touch me like that. Don't show me that. Whatever it is, tell them. Probably they don't realize that they've made you uncomfortable. If you are uncomfortable to the point that you really can't even say back to that person right now, that's fine. Go let your supervisor know. Go let the Human Resources Director know. If it's your supervisor who's happened to make you uncomfortable, again, they probably really didn't mean to, but if they have, go to your HR director. Anybody that's higher than you on the food chain, go let them know, because we have to know about it to do something about it. When that complaint gets made, it's going to be investigated, and the results of the investigation are going to be told to you if you are the person that complains. So you're not going to just come and complain and never know if anything ever happened about it. You're the one that comes in, does the complaint. They're going to investigate it, and they're going to come to you and say, we investigated this. This person did acknowledge that they said that to you. They understand that was inappropriate at work. We've taken the appropriate measures. Or we've investigated, we've talked to that person, and we've talked to anybody and everybody else that may have been there at the time. Nobody else says that you said it. We understand maybe you're the only person that heard it. We have warned this person not to behave this way. You're going to know what happens. But because the investigation, it's so many times, it's not just a he said, she said. It's going to be, he said this to me in front of these other people. Well, the investigation is going to require those people to be talked to and ask what happened. So we can't promise you complete confidentiality. We'll use every bit of discretion that possibly can be used, but do understand that just because you come make a complaint, we're not going to go and say, ma'am, you made a complaint against this gentleman, and gentlemen, you're fired today. That would never happen. It's going to actually be investigated so that the right action takes place. We are going to also make sure that there's no retaliation for you making a legitimate complaint about any type of harassment or discrimination. So what is harassment? It is words, conduct, or an action, usually repeated or persistent, that being directed at a specific person annoys them, alarms them, or causes them substantial emotional distress, and it serves no legitimate purpose. Please understand, usually repeated or persistent doesn't mean always. Sort of this joke that, well, I get one free pass. I said that to you, that's my one free pass. That's really not the law. If you said something to somebody that made them uncomfortable the first time, perhaps you then get warned and talked about it, but there are certain things that just one time is going to be enough that that's harassment. If you physically touch someone in a sexual manner, you don't get to do that twice. You don't get to go and grab someone's crotch once and go, can't get me, that's only the first time. You don't get to do that. So there are certain things I'd like to tell you, just use your common sense. We talked about it sort of earlier that that's not always the case, but do remember there are certain things that are always going to be off limits at work. Also, it has to serve no legitimate purpose. If someone comes to you and discusses something with you that is an area that makes you uncomfortable, well, if that's a legitimate purpose at work, if someone comes to you and says, ma'am, you sit at a desk all day, and I'm sure you don't realize it, but the people come into your desk to get things from you, when you're leaned over writing, you didn't realize that your shirts tend to be low cut enough that everybody's having to look down your shirt. Maybe you feel really uncomfortable that somebody came and told you that, but there's a legitimate business purpose in that. You aren't being harassed when somebody says your clothes are inappropriate at work. In fact, you probably prefer to be told because you really didn't realize it. But that's not harassment. There are clearly legitimate reasons that you do have to discuss some of these things. Sexual harassment is not just men harassing women. Women may harass men, and people of the same sex may harass each other. He's been in the news a lot in like the last 10 days, where all sorts of accusations from years and years and years of same-sex sexual harassment. Realize that somebody of your same sex can sexually harass you. Many, many times it's not homosexual in nature. It just happens to be one man that has said something to another man that made him uncomfortable, and it was of a sexual nature. It doesn't have to be a man or a woman propositioning another man or a woman. It may be that you have a coworker who, married or unmarried, every weekend they like to go have some sort of crazy exploits with their husband or whoever they might, wife, whoever. And they like to come back and tell about it at work on Monday. And you really don't want to hear about their sex life on Monday, every Monday, you're being sexually harassed. So you don't have to hear that at work. So first of all, tell them to stop. Secondly, go report it to somebody. Harassers can be supervisors, co-workers, or non-employees. Clearly, your supervisors don't need to be saying anything like this to you. Just because it's your co-worker and they don't really have any authority or power over you at work, they shouldn't talk like this to you at work either. They shouldn't touch you at work, anything of those nature. that nature. Non-employees, if you are the person that a vendor comes in, if you are the person that meets the UPS man every day to get the packages and give the packages to, and the UPS driver is saying inappropriate things to you, you're being sexually harassed. Tell your employer, tell your supervisor that that's happening. UPS is a really large company. I promise when the phone call is made to the UPS place that their driver is sexually harassing, it will stop. You don't have to keep enduring that. Same thing if it's somebody coming in to get a license for something, to renew a tag, whatever it is in dealings that you're having with the public. If you're out working on the road somewhere, repairing something, and somebody's making comments to you, just citizens in general, tell them to stop. Tell your supervisor if they won't stop, and it will get stopped. You don't have to keep going and being subjected to that. No one has to go to work every day and be made to feel uncomfortable. If you are the person that the harassment is not directed to, you may still be victims if you are forced to observe the illegal conduct. Case in point. Apparently, he had a consensual relationship, but the people in the governor's office that were having to listen to and see the interaction, they were actually being sexually harassed themselves because they didn't want to have anything to do with this. So you don't have to be the person that it's directed to still be sexually harassed by someone. Quid pro quo, this is a type of harassment. This is submission to such conduct is either expressed or implied term or condition of your employment. Submission to or rejection of the conduct by the individual is used as the basis for employment decisions. Employment decisions or expectations are based on the employee's willingness to grant or deny sexual favors or willingness to submit to unwelcome behavior. This for that. I will give you the best shifts if you'll go out with me. I will make sure you get a raise if you sleep with me. I will make sure you get the best truck assigned to you if you sleep with my daughter. Whatever the case may be, if you're doing this for that, that's quid pro quo. And for years and years, I've given these talks, and I've talked and said, most people are smart enough that that's really not the sexual harassment claims that we deal with quite so much anymore. Even if you've never been trained on sexual harassment, most of you have enough sense to know that you can't say, I'll do something for you if you do a sexual favor or something sexual in nature for me at work. It's not allowed. And then this guy blew my mind. I mean, apparently that doesn't apply if you're in Hollywood, or it hadn't applied for the last 20 years until all of a sudden we have this hashtag #MeToo where everybody is going, this has happened, it has happened, it has happened. And you have people that you've never heard of in Hollywood, some very, very famous actresses going, he told me I had to do this and he would get me this job. He made me do this so that I could get this. So it's clearly out there still. It's clearly people in a very high position of power that think they can get away with this. But you don't have to be this rich and mega powerful to still think you're powerful. So if somebody is trying to approach you with a quid pro quo, this for that, by all means, it's illegal and you should report it. What I typically deal with, though, in a matter of lawsuits and defending employers when they get sued because of this happening at work, is hostile work environment. And that's when you're going to work and somebody's behaving such that it interferes with your work performance, or it creates a hostile, intimidating, or offensive work environment. It's where verbal or nonverbal behavior in the workplace focuses on the sexuality of another person or occurs because of that person's gender or other protected characteristics. It's where verbal or nonverbal behavior in the workplace is unwanted or unwelcome, and it's severe and pervasive enough that it affects the work environment. This is why you can't go to work and say whatever it is you want to say, because you are causing somebody else to be uncomfortable at work. You can't go talk about your weekend exploits. You can't go talk about your date. You can't go talk about what you and your spouse did. At work, that's inappropriate, and it could very easily be making someone uncomfortable. And it could be someone who's having to overhear it, or it could be the person that you're talking to. we tend to make assumptions of what people think is appropriate and not appropriate. And what you think is appropriate really may be beyond someone else's boundaries. So be sure that you realize that talking about or anything of these type natures is inappropriate at work. So examples of quid pro quo: demanding sexual favors in exchange for a promotion or a raise, demanding participation by a subordinate in a religious observance, not just sexual harassment, but you can't say, I really think you'd do a better job at work. You'd probably get a better evaluation if you'd come to church with me on Sunday. You don't get to force people to do things like that. That's their choice. You can't change their job performance expectations if they refuse repeated requests for a date. So if you've been asking somebody out and they keep saying no, or they say no the first time, you can't decide you're going to give them a bad evaluation for it. All right? You can't discipline or discharge an employee who ends a romantic relationship. If you're dating somebody that you work with and that relationship comes to an end, nothing about work can change. Nothing about work should have changed when you started dating. Nothing about work can change when you stop dating. Those have to be two totally separate things. Supervisors should not date their subordinates. Coworkers can date, but do remember, if something goes wrong in the personal relationship, that can't come to work. Each employee has a responsibility to maintain a workplace free of any form of sexual harassment. Sexual harassing conduct in the workplace, whether committed by supervisors, non-supervisory personnel, is prohibited. So this is what conduct is, but it's not limited to just this. Sexual flirtations, touching, advances, or propositions. Verbal abuse of a sexual nature, graphic or suggestive comments about an individual's dress or body. Again, we've talked about there may be a time when somebody needs to discuss with you your clothing at work because it's inappropriate, it's dirty, something like that. But talking about it in a suggestive way, that would be inappropriate. Sexually degrading words to describe an individual. The display of sexually suggestive objects or pictures, including nude photographs. Let's go back. Verbal abuse of a sexual nature. I always say this every time I give one of these talks. There are certain words that are sexual in nature. The F word is sexual in nature. Lots of people use it out of anger and frustration. It is sexual in nature. Period, the end, it is. It should never be said at work, ever. That is a word that should be off limits. And I've given this, it's so funny. I give this presentation all the time. My law enforcement officers are always the ones that are like, what? I really gave to a group of deputy sheriffs one time, and I promise you would think I told them they couldn't breathe oxygen. I mean, it was just like, no! That it's inappropriate at work. It shouldn't be said, no matter how upset or mad you get. I had a county commissioner who I had to go sit down and say, the employees are really upset because you keep saying this word at work. You're not allowed to say this word ever again. To which he told me he could not live that way. And I said, well, if you have to say it, you can pick up the phone and you can call me. And the next day I answered the phone and I heard F, 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 like 20 times. And I'm like, you okay now? He's like, okay, yeah, I'm all right. I'll talk to you later. Hung up. It is an inappropriate word. It is offensive. It is certainly used more commonly now than it used to be, and maybe you're not offended by it, but it's offensive to a lot of people, and it is off limits from this point forward at work. That's my law for today. Okay. Number 5, display of sexually suggestive objects or pictures, including nude photographs. This is my next soapbox. 10 or 15 years ago, everybody did not have porn at the palm of their hands 24/7. If you would like to look at porn 24/7 now, you all carry around this little smartphone. You can look at it whenever you want to on this little fancy phone you carry around. You cannot look at it at work. Period, the end. Do whatever you want to on your own time, unless it's a city-issued phone, and then never look at it. But if it's your own phone, that's your choice to do with what you want to. But it is not at work. It is not appropriate at work. Kind of society's standards about used to if people watched porn, they did it in the confines of their house with all the shades pulled and the doors locked because it was something that wasn't viewed favorably by society. Well, now it's just part of culture. It is not at work. If you have nude photographs on your phone, if they are supposed to be on your phone, if your sweetheart sent you a picture of themselves very, very sexy naked, good for you. Enjoy it all you want to, but not at work, okay? And if you get one, you cannot show it to your coworkers at work. It's not, I don't care if it's not the coworker and you go, look what I've got. That is inappropriate at work. I had a case where a guy worked in a computer information sciences department. He received a text of a naked female, a picture. It happened to be one of his coworkers that her current boyfriend decided to share with him. Well, instead of deleting it or telling her you're dating a real jerk, he went around and showed it to everybody in the department because that's a nice thing to do. Well, he went around and he showed it to one guy who was really, really uncomfortable because he's now seen a naked picture of his coworker. So he went to the HR department and said, I'm really uncomfortable. He's showing these naked photos. Well, the guy that showed the naked photos lost his job because he actually sexually harassed another man. He made another man feel uncomfortable about something of a sexual nature. Sadly, then, the woman had to be called in and said, we hate to tell you this, but your whole department has now seen you naked. And this is how I know there's a cultural shift and a generational gap. She was like, oh, okay, thanks for letting me know, and kept going. Where, you know, if she was 10 years older, she would have dug a hole, crawled in it, asked somebody to put the dirt on top of her, and never let her face be seen again. She, cute girl, so apparently she didn't care. But I don't care if you care or not, naked photos, off limits at work. Let's see. Harassment can be verbal, visual, written, or physical. It can include jokes, pictures, cartoons, statements, etc. You know, cartoons now, we all have memes. The memes also that are sexual in nature are inappropriate at work. Don't share them at work, show them at work. Jokes, the bottom one talks about those forced to witness harassment may also be victims. If you and your coworker on Monday morning like to come in and have your competition to say who can tell the dirtiest joke, that's great. But the person sitting in the break room having to listen to that dirty joke that doesn't want to hear these dirty jokes is being harassed. So even if you know you and the person you're talking to are completely comfortable with this, nothing is unwanted, nothing is unwelcome, at work it's inappropriate. Don't behave that way. We've talked about it can be supervisors, coworkers, members of the public. It can be assault, touching, blocking, hugging, kissing, pinching, gesturing, grabbing. Assault, clearly if you physically hurting someone, inappropriately touching them, that would be a physical harassment. Touching, blocking, hugging. I always say this, we are Southerners. Lots of Southerners, I'm lumping us into a group here, but Southerners like to hug. It's just what we do. In fact, as we finished the program before, one of the men walking out said, "Nah, I'm a hugger." That's okay. I'm not asking you not to be yourself. But somebody's had a bad day, somebody's lost a family member, they've got somebody that they're close to sick, their pet died, whatever, and you want to hug and comfort them and you hug, "I'm so sorry," that's okay. Loving, rubbing, hugging, reaching all down, not okay. There's a difference. The side hug, excellent way to go. The man hug, grab hands, beat each other unmercifully on the back, if that's what you want to do, that's great. But rubbing passionate hugs, that's inappropriate at work no matter how Southern you are. Also remember, everybody doesn't like to be touched. Just because you like to hug somebody and you think they need a hug, doesn't mean they want a hug. Doesn't mean they've appreciated your hug, and you've made them really uncomfortable. I told them earlier when my brother and sister-in-law got married, a year later, they invited some family members over for us to come watch the wedding video on the 1-year anniversary. And they popped the video in, and my brother says, "Oh yeah, this was the worst day of my life." My sister-in-law was not very happy about this. And he was like, no, I had to hug all those people. all those people hugged me and touched me all day. He doesn't want to be hugged and touched. It's gross to him. He doesn't like it. So even though you think you're being nice, be cognizant of the fact that, and if you know a person doesn't like to be touched and you just delight in hugging them anyhow, my husband hugs my brother every time he sees him, every time, because it makes my brother just cringe, which makes my husband delighted. But my brother nicknamed my husband Pookie, so he's got to do something to get back at him. That's great at family reunions and stuff. It's not great at work. If you know somebody doesn't like to be touched, even if it's completely non-sexual, don't do that to them. Kissing, if you are dating or married to a coworker, kiss when you leave the house, kiss when you get home. Don't kiss at work. Even if it's consensual, it's just inappropriate at work. Gesturing, this typically happens when somebody has gone out on the weekend to a club, watched a movie, something, and they saw somebody doing something pretty extreme and over the top. Don't come back to work on Monday and reenact it, because you've just made somebody uncomfortable. I don't care how great you can reenact that sexy girl dancing, don't do it at work. It's inappropriate. Verbal, again, jokes, remarks, or questions, not just because you didn't make it in the form of a statement, but you asked the question, hey, do you like to this? That's inappropriate at work. Propositions for sexual activity, pressure for dates, obscene language, which is gender specific or sexual nature. Y'all all know those words. I don't need to say them to you. Inappropriate comments about a person's body. Pressure for dates, if you want to ask a coworker out, that's fine. Do it on your own time. Don't do it at work. Visual cartoons, we talked about memes, written documents, pin-up calendars. I guess this presentation must have initially been done in 1940. Drawings, computer images, computer games, posters, faxes, emails. We talk about computer images and computer games. If you don't play computer games now, I do not, you don't realize how graphic they can be. You know, they have ratings now just like movies do. If you want to play this and you're allowed to get on your phone, on your lunch hour and all this kind of stuff, that's your business, but it's not okay to do at work. If you, on your lunch hour, can play a computer game, that's fine. I highly recommend Wheel of Fortune. It's never going to be offensive to anybody, but some of these video games that are out there now, there's nudity in the video game. No nudity at work. It's just, it can't ever be. But he was just joking, and that's what we hear. I didn't mean it, I was just joking. Well, we don't get to joke about these things at work. Tell a joke at work, get along well, but not about these things. How would you feel if somebody made that kind of joke to your spouse or your child? Most of us would agree we don't want our children or our spouse talked to that way. Would you do it in front of your mama? Some of us might have really cool moms that think a good sexual harassment joke's great. But really, would you do it in front of your mom? And if your mom's that cool and crazy and out there, would you do it in front of your pastor or your kids? If you wouldn't behave that way in front of them, then don't behave that way at work. If the behavior is inappropriate, it is inappropriate at work. That's just, if you ever have a question, think to yourself, I have a 16-year-old daughter. She has a part-time job. Would I want somebody to say this to her? If you have even a moment's hesitation, then it's off limits. So, but you have to report it. We can do this training. We can tell everybody what is appropriate and what's not appropriate. But if you don't report it, your employer can't do anything to stop it. So if it happens, come let us know that it happened. It's going to be investigated. You're going to find out about it, but you have to tell us. If you're found to have engaged in any form of harassment of an employee, you're going to be subject to discipline, up to and including termination. So, if you've been doing something at work for the past 20 years that I've now told you you shouldn't be doing at work, now you're sort of put on notice. So don't do it, because now the person who really has wanted to complain about you is probably going to spend the next 2 weeks thinking, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt so that they don't do this to me again. And then you keep doing it, and you're going to get told. It's going to be complained about, and you're going to be disciplined for it, because it's inappropriate. It's not nice to treat people this way, but it's also really costly to your employer, because if they get sued for it, these are very expensive suits. We don't want to have that happen. If you are dissatisfied with the outcome of the investigation, or if it persists or reoccurs, come tell us again. So let's say you've come to HR and you've said, Sue is harassing me. And they investigate and they say, Sue, don't do that anymore. And Sue says, okay, I won't. And 2 weeks later, Sue does it again. Well, as far as HR knows, it's been taken care of. So if you don't tell again, we can't fix it again. If it happens again, it won't happen the third time, because Sue won't have a job. You don't get to keep behaving this way. Like I said, you aren't always guaranteed 1 free pass. I'm pretty confident you definitely aren't getting 2 free passes. Your employer is not going to retaliate against you in any way for reporting harassment or discrimination. Retaliatory behavior is broader than any adverse employment action. It includes any behavior that's going to discourage you from reporting harassment or discrimination. Truly, the most expensive lawsuits out there for employers are retaliation lawsuits. Somebody says, I came and complained about this. They didn't like that I complained about it, and so a month later they concocted a reason to let me go. They changed my shift. They did something to make me miserable at work. It's the most expensive lawsuit there is out there. Your employer's not going to do that. So come and make the complaints if you need to do so. I would highly recommend you saying to the person first, stop it. See if you can handle it that way. If not, report it. At the same time, if you report something falsely, just like if you reported it falsely to the police department, you'd get in trouble for that. You have no protection if you falsely reported something. You are just as likely to lose your job for that as if somebody actually harassing somebody. So tell the truth if you're being harassed. Don't use this as a way to get to your coworker that you don't really just like. Take care of yourself and your coworkers around you. That's a wrap. His career and all. Yours too if you do it. Anybody have any questions about what you're supposed to do at work, not supposed to do at work? Don't know if this is or is not harassment? Anything like that? Yes, sir.
All right. The city furnishes certain individual cell phones. There's other individuals that get reimbursed because they don't want the city cell phone. They want to keep their personal cell phone. Mm-hmm. So they get reimbursed for the use of that cell phone each month. Mm-hmm. What about the photographs and all that? Because it's technically not the city's property.
Right. It's not the city's property. If you're reimbursing them, you're probably actually reimbursing them for their usage of it, not for the price of the phone. So they own the phone. They can do with their phone what they want to on their own time. At work, I don't care if Santa Claus gave it to them, you can't have it at work. So I'm not asking you to delete what's on your phone to come to work, just don't pull it up when you're at work. So, all right. Yes, sir.
All right, you've got let's just say a part-time worker who has a supervisor, and the supervisor shares sexual activity, just bragging. They don't want to hear it. If they come and complain to another supervisor or somebody higher up, and you confront that individual, and I never said that. It becomes a he said, she said. How do you do it?
Lots and lots of times they are he said, she said, and you investigate it by asking as many direct questions as you can to get as many specifics as you can. If the person who's reporting it can't give you a lot of specifics, but a lot of generalities, you still can certainly believe them, but it's not quite as they told me on this date, at this time, I was here, this is this. Sometimes it'd be you could use cell phones to look at phone calls or text or something like that. But if it really just turns out that she said he was sexually harassing her, he says he wasn't, then the best thing you can do at that point is look at him and say, I believe that you didn't, but you have made some sort of comment that has made this person uncomfortable. Make sure you mind your P's and Q's at work. You know now what sexual harassment is. Don't do it. If I have another complaint about you, then we will have to take some sort of preventive measure. But you simply go back through and remind them what is and is not appropriate at work. The other thing is, if the person complaining, you can always, if they are content with that as a resolution, that's fine. If they are not happy with it, or they say it's still, move them to another department. You wouldn't necessarily discipline the person who you really have no proof other than a he said, she said, but separate the two so that they don't have to. Complaint doesn't have to be in writing. But a lot of times if it's a supervisor, one subordinate employee is complaining, then even if the subordinate says nobody else saw it, you go to the other employees and say, has this person ever done anything to make you uncomfortable in any way? Have they ever said anything off color, sexual in nature? And it may be that they've said it to 2 or 3, and then if you get sort of some corroboration, even if it's not on the same thing, but it's corroboration that has occurred over and over, then you'd have grounds to do, probably on that situation, just like a write-up, not a, write-up, maybe a 1-day suspension, but certainly not a termination at that point. So, all right. Any others? Okay. Thank you, guys. Good luck.